which is member items, announcements. Do we have anything else today on that? Mr. Lent?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I brought up yesterday an item that I want to talk about on page 37 of the minutes from the last meeting, if you want to refer to those. And basically, it said, Director Jensen said the current agreement between NDOW and Department of Ag is not to exceed $400,000. And if approved, the budget exceeds $400,000. NDOW and Agriculture will have to work out amendments to improve that. Well, the report I got yesterday had the total for the year, and you had 400,000, but I think we approved 470,000. So we've exceeded the 400,000. So that contract has to get renegotiated with Ag right away, because when it gets to 400,000, I assume they have to stop. And so the way I look at it, you have that sheet, you had a balance of 177,000, but I think that was you've got to add 77,000 at 400, and we got 100,000 carryover, not 177, because you have the category 09 wildlife services at 400,000, and I think we approved 470,000. So that number is wrong. I think it's 70,000 more than we approved.
I'd have to go back. I don't have that in front of me, but there is a prudent reserve there to have dollars available to respond to emergency issues.
Right, no.
And I'm not sure whether that 70 grand is a portion of that. My gut tells me that's what that is. Patrick, I think that's correct. So those dollars are available to us. If we see a predation thing going on in the wintertime, we can use those dollars to go get wildlife services to target those particular areas.
That's not a problem. I just want to make sure that contract gets going, because we're right at the 400,000, and if we wanted to prove of something else, we wouldn't be able to do it because they wouldn't get paid. And the other question I had is on that balance forward, 177,000, if that's what it is, that stays there till next year then, right?
Correct. Balance forward. It goes
Balance forward will stay in that account. Okay, I just was bringing up that we're right at the max now, and we need that contract renegotiated, because right at the very top, that's what the minutes we said, and I wanted to bring that to everyone's attention again. After I got this yesterday, I realized we're right at the max.
Right.
Okay.
I'm glad you said that. We are spending money killing predators.
No, I didn't. I never said we weren't. I never
Thank
said
you.
we weren't.
You know,
Mr. Vogler. Hey, you woke him up.
all right, but yeah, this did come up at the last meeting, and I believe that Mr. Jensen did mention it, that we do need to get that contract redone for a slightly higher number, because we did approve. I think it was 470, right at that. So we need, what's the process, and how long would that take to get that redone?
When I get back to the office next week, we'll pull the contract and take a look at it, see what we have to do. We'd have to amend it, get it on the Board of Examiners. I'm trying to think. Yeah, that would have to go to Board of Examiners. We'd probably be looking at probably the December BOE that we could get it on. And I was just looking at the budget authority in the current fiscal year. We're going to need to do a work program as well, and we should be able to get that on the December IFC agenda.
Okay, let's see, Mr.
But there should be, I mean, there's sufficient money in the contract and authority that they can keep working it, you know. We just got to get it done before the end of the year, so.
Okay, that sounds fair enough. Mr. Jensen isn't here to answer that. Well, okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr.
Earl?
Chairman. Come back to the question I was starting on yesterday. Do you have any idea when we're going to get a new predator guy that we can start working on the fiscal year 2011 predation management plan?
That's going to be a tall order.
I know.
There's a whole bunch of reasons why Kevin left, and that's not lost on other professionals out there that we might apply for this position, but we're certainly going to move forward with that. As far as getting the workload completed, everybody at Endo's got more than a full-time job.
Oh, I'm sure.
Okay, so, and we're putting things in priority as far as what people are working on. In the game division, as an example, folks are working on their Pittman-Robertson reports, which have to be there by a certain date or we don't get the federal funds. That's more important than all the other things. So it will be kind of, talking with Larry last week, we'll feather that into, there'll be additional work for folks. We will be, though, you need to understand, if we take a person that's been funded with a certain pot of money to do a certain thing, and now they're not doing that, and they do the predator work, they will be charging against that predator pot. So we will not miss a deadline, for sure, and we'll end up getting the work done, so.
Thank you.
Okay, we have, anybody else down here? Okay, we have another one, with Mr. Howell, and then we'll have Mr. Lent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're still on this member items, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yesterday, we had a gentleman before us for a good half hour that we had no chance of solving his problem. And it seemed to me like we shouldn't put an 80-year-old man through that when he thought he had a chance to get his license back, and he never did. Never did have a chance. I don't think we should put anybody in that position again.
Okay, we have response.
You know, the problem with that is the United States Constitution guarantees due process to every person in this country, which means you have notice and opportunity to be heard. That was his opportunity to be heard. He didn't have a chance, that's true. Usually I call people and explain to them what the commission can do and can't do. I didn't do it in this time, but I know that Mr. Saunders was contacted by NDOW and they explained what would happen. He came here knowing he had to get this commission to change the law in order to get him his license back. He knew he didn't have a chance under the current law. He asked you to change the law. And so I don't think we put him through anything he didn't want to go through, so.
Okay, we had Mr. Lent, and then Mr. Capurro, and then,
Following up, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Following up on Commissioner Capurro's comments about a predator biologist, are you going to, are you going to advertise one, or are you just going to give the position to Tony Wasley and make him a combination? Deer biologist and predator biologist.
No. Tony Wasley is our deer specialist. We will advertise this. It will not be just internally. I'm going to have to advertise this nationally and see what pops up. With the way the economy is, you know, I've been surprised, and pleasantly surprised, the quality of the candidates that we've gotten for many of the jobs. This one will be interesting to see if people are willing to actually move to Nevada. That works against us with the, you know, the unemployment rate, all the things that are going on in Nevada, and our salary range is not what it is in Colorado or some of the other states. So that's why Russ Mason left, frankly.
all right. We had, who else do we have? We had Mr. Macbeth.
I'd like to follow up on what Charlie Howell was saying with regard to Mr. Saunders yesterday, and it's a pattern that I've seen in many of the hearings that we've had, and I don't know if there's anything we can do about it, but what these sportsmen are doing, and sportsmen and guides, and they are basically trying to fight these things at this commission when they really should be dealing with this issue at the trial level of where the violation occurs. What they do is they go in and then they plead guilty to these charges. They don't get themselves an attorney. They don't understand what's coming down the road. And then after it's all wrapped up and there's nothing that we can do, our hands are tied, they come to us, for relief. And unfortunately, we can't give any relief. They have a right to come to us. There's a procedure in place. That's the procedural due process that the DAG is talking about. But once they plead guilty, they have basically tied our hands. And so really it's a matter of trying to communicate to these individuals that, if they were to get an attorney, or even if they were to become familiar with the process and educate the justices and the judges that are before them that they're going to have 12 demerits and they're going to lose their civil life license privileges, at that point in time, maybe a plea could be worked with the department counsel and whoever's representing the department in these proceedings. And, you know, for instance, we could have, you know, if it was done at the trial level, Mr. Saunders could have pled to the violation, pled to some lesser violation with a 10 demerit point. And that would give him an incentive to, you know, toe the line from here on out, because if he got one more 3 demerit point, he'd be out. But he didn't do that. He pled guilty to a 12 demerit violation. End of story. And so the efforts that if any efforts are going to need to be made, it has to be made, you know, at communicating to these people what the civil aspects of their criminal conviction are going to be. In other words, it's not over at that trial level. The civil parts of this will then take over, and that's where they, you know, that's where they really need to be looking ahead as to what the implications are of what they are doing.
Okay.
The department probably cannot advise them. That's the problem. I don't know if you know, if even, you know, the attorneys can advise these people what they should be doing. So they go in there by themselves, uninformed, and it's really sad. I don't know if there's anything we can do, but that's the problem.
The department doesn't, other than as a witness, doesn't participate in those. Those are prosecuted by the local district attorney. So that was probably, maybe there's some outreach to the district attorneys or something like that.
Mr. Chairman?
Go
In
ahead.
addition to that, the department would have a problem if they tried to advise people along that line, in that then they would be providing legal advice. They're not attorneys, and they're certainly not acting on behalf of the individual who's being cited, and they can't act on behalf of the person who's being cited. So the department really can't get into that discussion of here's what may happen. They have to stop at the time they issue the citation.
So, Mr. Bonamici, you have our solution. I can hear it.
What we do when we issue a citation, like I pointed out yesterday, on the front of the citation, we write in the demerit points. We change the format of our citation, so there's written notification. I'm not saying it happens 100% of our time, but our officers try and always advise the individual that this does carry 12 demerit points with it, or 6 demerit points, or what have you, if convicted. In this case, Mr. Saunders did appear before a judge. The judge had the opportunity to reduce it to a violation, fishing without a license, or fishing prohibited method, a variety of options. The judge chose not to. So it's kind of out of our hands. We did our part. We advised them. Everything was up front with them. And then at some point, it's incumbent upon them to decide if they want to retain an attorney, if they want to research the law themselves, and so forth. But just as Mr. Newton pointed out, we don't provide legal advice. We just tell them, here's the facts, and end right there. In Mr. Saunders' case, I did talk to him probably 4 times over the phone and explain to him every time what the commission could and could not do legally. I told him, I said, I can't stop you from appearing before the commission, nor am I going to try to. But I don't want you going there with false expectations, thinking they can change the charge, reduce the charge, amend the demerit points. I said, that's not a legal option. So he was advised of all that.
Excellent. I think that, Mr. Pearl and Lenny.
Thank you.
got another one.
Rob, I think you give JP's a little too much credit for giving credence to any penalties other than the criminal penalty that's before them. I've had experience with that, not myself personally, but people I represented who had exactly that problem, where the JP simply wasn't very well informed. So what was happening was in this case, it was DMV and DOT, were having to periodically make the rounds of the JPs to bring them up to date on some of the laws and regulations and that. And it's a tedious thing, but don't give them the credit that they knew exactly, that he just chose not to. He may not have been informed enough to know it. I would say this. To me, I think there should be a degree of this. To issue the death penalty for the size of a net for a guy who your own person indicated she wasn't physically intimidated for, yes, he lied. But it seems to me like that's an awfully harsh penalty. Yes, we're following the law the way it is currently written. Maybe we should change it to give some sort of range up to 12 instead of it's 12, you're dead. It just seems to me like there are some violations that are more horrendous, if you will, than others. And to treat them all the same way just seems to me like there was nothing we could do. I'm sure you went through everything you could do, but it brings out the point that we need to look, review, just as we did yesterday with the mountain lion issue, we need to review what we have to see if it's appropriate. And nothing better than to have a case where you're sitting here saying, I don't think anybody on this panel, or you probably, feel that it shouldn't have been somewhat of a lesser penalty on it.
All right. We had a question down at the end. Mr. McBeth?
I agree with everything, but I do take exception with one thing. The net issue was the issue that brought the game warden to that site. The violation and the charge was hindering the game warden. There's two different issues there, and the demerit points apply to hindering the game warden. It's very serious when you have law enforcement and, you know, and when you read this regulation, the very purpose of having 12 demerit points on this charge is because it was a serious charge of hindering the game warden. The net was the underlying issue that brought her there, but it was his actions of being invasive and not cooperating with the game warden that was the charge, which he pled guilty to, and which has the 12 demerit points. I don't think just having a net would be 12 demerit points. I want to make that distinction.
I think we're beating on this. I mean, I don't have videotape. I can't tell what happened there. We've got to trust our officers. This case, I don't know where else we can go on this. We have Mr. Shrum. I don't know what other options we have.
Chairman Brains, excuse me, I was going over this yesterday evening, and I agree with Commissioner Howell. I think this penalty of 12 demerits, because we're getting into an area of he said, she said, and dealing with human nature, and I think there should be some leeway there rather than assessing, you know, here's your 12 points. We all have to follow the law, but to me, I think it's I can't call it abusive, but I think it's excessive. You know. Thank you.
Okay, hopefully we can move on this. We have something on any other member items, hopefully on a different subject. Okay, Mr. Vogler?
I don't know if we'll ever be able to do a Rodney King on this. I hit the wall so fast when that little box that Assemblyman Claiborne talked about yesterday, that little $3 predator fee. And did you say that out of that predator fee money will come the salary for the gentleman that will administer the program?
I absolutely said that. The legislative intent is very clear. All you have to do is go back to the legislative record. And when Mr. Claiborne was asked by Mr. Arbery, what is the intent for this money? And he said, well, we have to hire staff, buy vehicles, pay for to staff up the program. In state service, or even federal service, but state service across any state that I know of, when you have a program like this, you have to have staff to implement it and put it together. We don't have people sitting around at their desks without a full-time job, especially with the funding that we have. A person has a job that's funded by a variety of sources, And it's inappropriate to use sportsman's money to be doing non-game work, as an example. So if you want contracts written, if you want predator plans written, if you want to facilitate the cooperation and coordination with wildlife services, we need a person dedicated to that cause, and that's the predator biologist. And if you look, we're not charging the full amount to that, but that was what was going on before I got here. I looked at the legislative intent. I don't know what Mr. Claiborne was, maybe his intentions were that it wasn't that way, but that's not the way it's written in the legislative record.
What about duck stamp? What about sage hen stamp? What about trout stamp? Do you then hire a trout person out of that, a sage hen person out of that?
Yes, and there is no
And
sage
so
hens.
ultimately, everything gets absorbed by personnel? Or
No.
do we raise the fee? Maybe that's what we need to do, is raise the fee.
I mean, if you look at the total amount, was it $2.3 million of the predator fee has gone to wildlife services to manage predators? What is 18% over since the inception of the program?
But, yeah, 2.4 million went to wildlife services since inception, 400,000 went to staff, about 14%. And this last year, we only spent $33,000 on staff, 400,000 went to wildlife services. So it's
If you look
it's a
across
small
programs, that is cheap to get a program up and running and to put that much money on the ground. We have to have somebody available when wildlife services calls and says they got a problem. We don't have people sitting around, that's their job. We don't have extra capacity. And that's the capacity problem that we're suffering with, and we're going to be suffering even more with the downturn in the economy, the decline in license sales, on and on and on. So,
All right, I think, let's see, first of all, what, Mr. Lent?
Commissioner Vogler, the legislature all the time does unfunded mandates, and that's what this is, and it could be, but, I think it's wrong to, every time the deputy director comes to Fallon and talks to us about predator, you allocate time allocation, take money out of the predator fee to do that, If you got a biologist on the ground doing projects or something, that's different, but every time you nickel and dime when somebody mentions the word predator, we'll take an hour out of his time, and that's where there's no way we can ever stand over and watch the time allocation, but.
that's absolutely not true. That's not true.
No, I'm just
It's
saying,
not
these
happening.
things, but, a lot of time the legislature does do unfunded mandates. We're not doing it with the duck stamp. We're not taking duck stamp money for the duck biologist. And so there are some of the obligated funds that we're not doing that to, so, yeah, you can use all the money out of the predator account for, and I don't think the intent was to send a predator biologist to predator school. I think that was not the intent of it, and that was in the current budget, to send them to a predator convention.
All right. Let's see. Anybody else have anything? I think the